Be it as rank up targets or on their own, rank 5s have been an extremely powerful group of monsters ever since the mechanic came out. And in this video, we'll be going over the best monsters of the rank to ever be printed. Starting us off at number 10, we have Digital Bug Corebage. This is a light rank 5 insect type Xyz monster that takes 2 or more level 5 insect monsters as materials. Alternatively, you can Xyz summon it by attaching 2 materials from a rank 3 or 4 insect type Xyz monster you control and rank it up on top of that monster. Once per turn, you can detach one of its materials in order to target a defense position monster your opponent controls and shuffle it into the deck. Also, if the battle position of a monster in the field is changed, you can attach 1 insect from your graveyard to this card. Corebage managed to be the only TCG playable card out of the entirety of the Digital Bug archetype. Its required materials make it almost impossible to bring out the usual way. As to this day, there isn't even a single level 5 light insect monster in the game. As a result, this card was pretty much always brought out thanks to its rank up method. Though this was never done with the archetype's rank 3, Scar Radiator, but rather on top of the much older and more importantly more generic, number 20, Giga Brilliant, which had already seen a lot of plays in OTK enabler in all manners of level 3 decks, all of which were very glad now that Corebage was yet another option in their extra deck. And it may not sound like that big of a deal, as even at the time, the rank 3 pool was already filled with all kinds of spot removals such as Breaksword and Alucard, but this was the only one that would get rid of cards without sending them to the graveyard. This lets you get rid of monsters with great floating effects such as El Shadal Shekinaga and Dante Traveler of the Burning Abyss without having to worry about your opponent getting those resources back. The only other instance of these digital bugs being playable would be in Duel Links, where being able to rank up Inzektor Exostag into Digital Bug Rhinocebus gave decks with the rank 5 access a huge advantage over everything else, and even landed Rhinocebus on their limited 2 list. But back to the main topic, the Giga Brilliant into Corebage package was a staple in Burning Abyss, seeing play from the moment Corebage was released and only really fallen off towards the beginning of Master Rule 4. And at number 9, we have Artifact Durendal, a light rank 5 fairy Xyz that can be made with any 2 level 5 monsters. Once per turn, you can detach a material to activate one of its 2 effects. The first can only be activated in response to a monster or normal spell or trap effect being activated on the field, and it changes the effect to be destroy a spell or trap card on the field your opponent controls. Alternatively, it can also make both players shuffle their hands into their deck and then draw the same number of cards as they had before. Durendal was the first rank 5 to have anything resembling a negate, and that made it into a pretty common inclusion for many decks with level 5s. It started out as yet another payoff for the artifact package, which was splashed into so many decks at the time. The way Durendal works is it'll change an opponent's monster effect into becoming a back row pop. While this does mean you need to control a spell or trap card to activate it, it also gives it great synergy with the rest of the artifacts, all of which special summon themselves when destroyed during your opponent's turn. Not only that, but since the effect will technically still resolve, your opponent won't be able to activate another copy of the card if it has a hard once per turn, something that would be impossible if you had just negated its activation. In an era full of power cards such as Soul Charge and Artifact Sanctum, having one of the few monsters able to answer both made a huge difference. This card kept seeing play throughout the year, showing up in Cleaforts, though they'd rarely go in the extra deck, and then Cosmo, which would be very happy forcing you to pop their Cosmo Town to get a search. However, both of these decks would eventually have a better rank 5 option for negate, as we'll see later on in this list. Though it was never its main use, Durendal's second effect also let it see a bit of play as a tech in Trickstars, which would make it using Coralbane and Instant Fusion, and then let you draw Reincarnation lock your opponent, even if you didn't manage to get the archetypal trap to hand, a combo that would win you the game on the spot. And at number 8, we've got Madolche Puddingcess Chocolat-a-la-Mode. This is an Earth Fairy Xyz monster with 2500 attack that can either be made using 2 level 5 Earths, or ranked up on top of a rank 4 or lower Xyz Madolche monster you control. Once per turn, you can target Madolche card in your graveyard and shuffle it back into your deck. While this card has Madolche Puddingcess as material, when a Madolche card in your graveyard is shuffled into your deck, you can detach 1 material from this card to special summon a Madolche monster from your deck in either face-up attack position or face-down defense position. Chocolat-a-la-Mode does a lot for Madolche decks, and it's one of the main reasons the archetype has remained somewhat playable throughout the years. It actually wasn't that easy to go into this card at first, with most of its setup requiring Brilliant Fusion. The card fit like a glove in Madolche's, as not only was its usual target a Gem Knight Seraph Knight, a level 5 Earth monster, it also gave you an additional normal summon, which Madolche really appreciated due to Magdalene's non-once per turn search effect on summon. Overlaying a Seraph Knight with a Puddingcess was pretty much the only way to get a Chocolat-a-la-Mode with both of its effects online, and it's important to note that the effect to summon another Madolche from the deck was not a once per turn either, meaning the play would generate a ton of value. Though these lines would no longer be possible as Brilliant Fusion got addressed on the ban list, future Madolche support many years later would once again enable the deck to abuse his Xyz to its full potential. Madolche Puddingcess brought Madolches to the modern era almost by itself as a free special summon that was also a 1-card Chocolat-a-la-Mode. In this more modern iteration, the deck became more of a going second strategy, main decking cards such as Kaijus, as his engine was great at breaking boards and also putting out damage. Though it would eventually become a lot better going first thanks to the release of Madolche Promenade. The deck hasn't gotten to tiered status in a while, but it remains a solid rogue option that can catch people off guard. And at number 7, we have Rebellion Xyz Dragon. This is a rank 5 Dark Dragon monster with 3000 attack, which can be summoned using 3 level 5s. This Xyz summon card cannot be destroyed by card effects. Its effect allows you to detach material to make this card gain attack equal to the total original attacks of all of the monsters in the field. Then, if this card has a Dark Xyz monster as material, it negates the effects of all of the monsters in the field as well. However, after this effect resolves, you can only attack with this monster during this turn. Rebellion was one of the newer rank-up forms of Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon, giving it a form that was great when going second to go along with Dark Requiem being great when going first. However, Rebellion would end up being much more useful than its older counterpart, despite never really being part of any end board. Unlike Dark Requiem, Rebellion did not require Dark Rebellion as an Xyz material to get its effect off, just a Dark Xyz monster to get a stronger version of them. While this did not make the card splashable by any means, it meant it'd combo perfectly with Raider's Knight, a rank 4 whose only effect is to rank itself up. This led to Rebellion seeing played Phantom Knights due to the archetype's ease of going into rank 4s through things like Shade Brigandine and Breaksword's Graveyard effect. The idea behind this card was to exhaust all of your opponent's interaction and then use any rank 4 play that would easily lead to lethal. This card gains the attack of all the monsters in the field when activated, both yours and your opponent's, which meant that even if your opponent had filled their board with bodies, any leftover attack-resistant monsters could be attacked over to end the game. At the time when this card saw play, that was often a spent Verte Anaconda after a Red Eyes Dark Dragoon had been summoned. Additionally, since this card leeches off the original attack of monsters, that meant it also went really well together with Forbidden Droplet, as dumping most of your hand for cost when it mattered if your opponent never lived to see turn 3. This card's popularity fell off alongside Phantom Knights, but to this day, it's not that uncommon to see the old dark rank 4 deck splash its little package for a surprise kill. And now at number 6, we have Tiras, Keeper of Genesis. This is a light rank 5 fairy monster with 2600 attack and takes 2 level 5 monsters as materials. Tiras' effects only apply while it has an Xyz material, where it cannot be destroyed by card effects, and at the end of the battle phase, if it battled, you can target and destroy a card your opponent controls. Also, during each end phase, you must detach material from it. Tiras was one of the first Xyz of the rank to come out, and also one of the most played ones for several years. Its generic materials meant it was always a consideration for any deck with level 5s. It's a decent beater at 2600 attack, which is somewhat hard to get rid of due to its destruction protection, with the potential to give you a +1 each time it sticks around, which made it great for early Yu-Gi-Oh! This card ended up seeing a lot of planned windups as one of the best rank 5s to end on, as it resisted several blowouts at the time such as Dark Hole and Mirror Force. When the artifacts came out, this became one of the safest answers to Unknown Back Row, as this card is unaffected by the floating effects of both Moral Touch and Sanctum. Tiras' usefulness would decrease with years, as its destruction protection became less prevalent as more varied kinds of removal were in the meta, and the possibility of an Xyz living through a couple of turns became the lowest it's ever been. However, this card would carve itself a niche in Eldritch as a nice tool for the mirror match. Tiras can be made with either of the Eldritch traps to go for a very hard to stop Zeus play, as very often the only way for your opponent to stop your Xyz from battling would be with their own Conquistador. Nowadays, this card doesn't really see any play, but if there's ever another rank 5 deck in the meta, this card will certainly be in it, and it's still the best Zeus enabler they have. And at number 5, we have number S39, Utopia the Lightning. This is a light warrior rank 5 monster with 2500 attack. It must be Xyz summoned through either 3 level 5 monsters, or more commonly by ranking it up on top of a rank 4 Utopia monster you control. However, this card cannot be used as material for another Xyz summon. When this card battles, your opponent is unable to activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. And once per chain, during damage calculation, if this card has Utopia under it, it can detach 2 materials to make its attack become 5000 during damage calculation only. Being able to turn an effectively useless regular Utopia into Utopia the Lightning is what led many people to start playing the heavily power-crept ranked 4 again. Even if you were trading 2 extra deck slots for really only a single monster, the Lightning provided more than enough utility to make up for it. This card getting up to 5000 attack was huge, as it was more than enough to beat over any boss monster at the time, ignoring most kinds of protection around. Not only that, but since it passively prevents your opponent from activating any effects as its attacks goes through, even boss monsters with negates won't be able to stop it from going through. As if that wasn't enough, since it prevents any monster's effects all the way until the end of the damage step, not only did it outmost boss monsters, it prevented any pesky floating effects from triggering as well. Utopia the Lightning matched up extremely well against most decks in the meta for a really long time, making it an auto-include for any deck that can go into rank 4s. It saw play in many huge players of the meta since its initial release, seeing play in decks like Draco Pals, ABC, and even Zodiacs, only really falling off with the release of Link monsters. The speed of the game had just increased to such a degree that having to out something during the battle phase was often not enough. It also didn't help that this card wasn't future-proofed in the slightest. Its restriction prevents it from being used as Zeus fodder, and it ended up being outclassed in its role by another Utopia retrain, Utopia Double, that instead of letting you remove an annoyed monster if it managed to attack successfully, would straight up kill your opponent instead. And at number 4, we have number 61, Volcasaurus, which is a fire attribute rank 5 Dinosaur Xyz monster that takes any 2 level 5 monsters as its materials. Once per turn, you can detach one material from this card to target and destroy a face-up monster your opponent controls, and then they take damage equal to the destroyed monster's original attack. But then this card cannot attack directly if it activates this effect. Volcasaurus makes this list as one of the best Autica enablers of its time. While it wasn't the best removal-wise, being outclassed even by much older Ardrias, the burn damage it inflicted was a huge difference. Popping anything with 2,000 or more attack would take a huge chunk of your opponent's life points, allowing even slower decks like Hat to go for game early. This card's downside of not being able to attack directly the turn it activates the effect was never an issue, as you could just rank it up into Gaia Charger, who not only could attack directly, but also inflicts piercing battle damage as well. Volcasaurus played a huge role in making the rank 5 pool as good as it was back in the Xyz era, highly improving decks like Inzektor and Constellar, as their threshold to end the game was faster than the other decks. It even almost single-handedly enabled Deathfrog OTK, a rogue strategy focused around using Infernal Reckless Summon to spam the field with Deathfrogs and hit for 8k. Even as the Pendulum era arrived and Powercrab stepped in, many decks at the time still went out of the way to make it. Shadows had a hard time going to rank 5s, but if they ever played a single rank 5, it was guaranteed to be Volcasaurus. Many of the Burning Abyss Astral Force builds would also run it, even if it meant they also needed to play a Grenosaurus to rank up into it. Volcasaurus continued to see play in any strategy that managed to put out a couple level 5s on boards for years, keeping itself relevant for a surprising amount of time, with the last time it saw play being an extra deck version of True Draco, often being the sole rank 5 in there as well. And at number 3, we have Constellar Pleiades. This is a light rank 5 with 2500 attack that can only be made with 2 level 5 light monsters as its materials. Once per turn, as a quick effect, it can detach a material from itself to target a card in the field and return it to the hand. Pleiades offers a simple yet extremely versatile ability in its quick effect bounce, which let it see play in several strategies throughout the years. Its existence pretty much single-handedly enabled Constellars to function, with their main payoff being that they could consistently make Pleiades in a time when few other decks could. The idea was to use it during your own turn to bounce your own 10 key for follow-up and then your opponent's turn to interrupt them. Pleiades' restricted materials was the only thing keeping it from being splashed into any deck, but with light being one of the most common attributes in the game, that wasn't that big of an issue. Once the artifacts came into meta, they also just so happened to fit its requirements perfectly. Not only was this card great with them, it was also great against them, as using regular destruction removal versus them would backfire tremendously. Pleiades would also come to be the main reason why the Astral Force tech in Burning Abyss worked in the first place, as it's a light warrior, just like Dante. With Tellarknight Tolmaeus, this card became playable in any rank 4 strategy too, as long as you were able to spare some extra deck space, letting it see play in the successor of the Constellar, Stellar Knights. Due to Sleprider being a light machine, as well as the Prime Monarch summoning itself as a level 5 light fairy, both Cosmo and Monarch had access to this powerful interaction as well. This is also the one rank 5 that was always guaranteed to be in any Eldritch extra deck, as their trap cards are level 5 lights as well, and can even be bounced back to the hand with Pleiades to reuse them. With such a powerful, easy to use interaction, the only way this card could have been better was if it was entirely generic. And at number 2, we have Cyber Dragon Nova. This light attribute rank 5 Xyz monster requires 2 level 5 machines as materials. Once per turn, you can detach material in order to special summon a Cyber Dragon from your graveyard. Also, as a quick effect, it can banish a Cyber Dragon from your hand or field to make this card gain 2100 attack until the end of turn. Lastly, if this card in your possession is sent to your graveyard by opponent's card effect, it lets you special summon any machine fusion monster from your extra deck. Cyber Dragon Nova would begin seeing play once Cyber Dragon Infinity came out. Infinity is a once per turn Omni Negate which can be made on top of Cyber Dragon Nova on the field for free. This made it so that Nova's effects were entirely meaningless, as decks only played as a stepping ladder for Infinity's negate. This was first seen in Perform Mage Performer Pals, which would leverage a level 4s to make Tellarknight Tolmaeus with 3 materials, which can then rank up into Nova and then Infinity, protecting your board from almost anything. The ability to put out such powerful interaction in Age, where decks were definitely not putting up negates like this, was a huge part of why Pepe was so powerful, and why an emergency ban list was required to deal with him. This interaction in particular was so problematic, it would leave Tolmaeus stuck on the ban list for several years afterwards. Once the deck was dealt with, Nova saw almost exclusive play in Cosmo for a large period of time, as the only deck that put out 2 level 5 machines at any time. This card was so good that later on, Metal foes would very often splash a package of Cleafort Scout and Monolith just as a way to get to level 5 machines to pendulum summon. That was until Galaxy Soldier came out, giving any deck that played lights an easy splashable package that can end on Infinity. This would end up becoming a really popular tech option in ABC, as it also helped get the pieces into the graveyard. Lastly, this card would become a huge reason why Cyber Dragon was able to work as a deck once their new support came out, giving an otherwise OTK-focused deck something to end on during their first turn. The last time Nova would see play would be alongside Mechaba, in any deck that could afford the X-Check space back when Maximus was seen play. During that time, with Invoke Dogmatica being such a popular pick, you could play this package as well as Elder Entity Natis to make your opponent lose the game on the spot if they ever activated Maximus's effects, as Natis would pop one of their cards, and then Nova's graveyard effect would trigger a Mechaba for free, which would be very hard to recover from. And last, at number 1, we have Outer Entity Azathot, a Dark Fiend rank 5. It must be XC summoned using either 3 level 5s or another Outer Entity XC's monster you control, and it cannot be used as material for another XC summon. When Azathot is XC summoned, your opponent is unable to activate monster effects for the rest of that turn. Also, if this card has 1 fusion, 1 synchro, and 1 XC's monsters as materials, it can detach material from itself to destroy all cards your opponent controls. Outer Entity Azathot is one of the hardest cards to deal with in the game, all due to a quirk in how its effect works. It doesn't actually activate. What that means is that as soon as Azathot hits the board, if you did not straight up negate its summon, all of your monster effects are going to be turned off for that turn. And it doesn't matter if Azathot leaves the field or gets its effect negated later on, it already applied a lingering effect on you. Additionally, this card is easy to make in any rank 4 deck since it can be made for free on top of a Narla, who just needs any 2 level 4s to be made. This card would thankfully take a bunch of years to be imported over to the TCG, but once it finally hit us towards the end of 2018, it wouldn't be long until people were begging for its banning. This card first saw play in danger-focused combo decks, as when going first, if you could manage to get a couple level 4s out, you'd be able to turn off all your opponent's hand traps for the turn. And if you were going second, you'd turn off their whole combo board instead. However, the real trouble came in towards the beginning of the following year, which saw a combo let you bring this card out during your opponent's turn, locking them out of the game entirely. By going into a Time Thief Redoer with a set rank up magic launch, you'd be able to bring out Azathot as soon as priority passed back to you during your opponent's main phase. This combo was also not very hard to pull off, as most of it was achieved by just resolving Bardiche, and it led to the PK rank up getting the boot not long after. Even without this complete lockout, this card was still a very big part of why Lunalight Orcus was as powerful as it was. The Lunalight let you go into Narla and to Azathot before committing much into the field, turning off your opponent's DD Crow, Ash, as well as the then recently released Nibiru the Primal Being. And then you'd use the rest of your hand to go into the full Orcus combo. Azathot was banned shortly after, in the huge list that preceded the new Master Rule, and it's the sort of card that can never come back into the game. Hand traps are a core part of the game, and being able to turn them all off with a card you can hardly interact with would make some combo decks far too powerful. Not only that, but since Konami has unbanned Telmaias and the PK rank up spell, it shows they're never willing to let this card back in, as these are both really easy ways to summon it out during your opponent's turn. Nothing fits number 1 better than the 1 rank 5 to ever have been banned, which will hopefully stay forbidden for the foreseeable future. Alright, and that's the list. If you happen to know of any other cards you might have missed or have any ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments below.